Chittang Dantang Sukhawahang, the well-trained mind brings happiness. Ye chitte sanya me santi mo kanti marabantana. By watching and knowing this mind, we will free ourselves from the bond of Mara. หนทางเดินไปเพลินในสงสารไม่มีสิ้นสุดหยุดลงที่ตรงไหนไม่เหมือนเดินอย่างพระละเอียดใหญ่ทางนั้นซ้ายใช่ไปนิพพาน Stumbled a bit over that last poem, and that talks about the path of samsara, which has no end to it. And so that's different to the path of the one gone forth, because that path goes directly to Nibbana. And may you all develop in blessings, and may you all cultivate in this path all the way to the Mokkha Dhamma, the Dhamma of liberation. So we begin by looking at our life and our health. We're familiar with living with these bodies from day to day. And our Dhamma practice also begins in the same place, looking at just this body and this life. So we're familiar with that on the external level of our physical body, and we've had to take care of our physical body for our whole lives, for as long as we've been alive. But there's another aspect of which we're all aware of, but it's harder to see, and that is the non-physical part that we call Nama Dhamma. We might call that the heart or the mind, or we might relate to that as the state of the mind, or the objects of the mind. And so the citta, or the heart, is all of these things. But it's not easy to grasp, because it has no body and no form. However, its effects can easily be observed. It's something which has a lot of power, and it has more effect. It has the ultimate effect in our life. It's the beginning of everything that we do. As the Dhammapada begins, Mano Pupankama Dhamma Mano Seta Mano Maya Manasa. So the mind is foremost of all actions. All actions begin with the mind and have the mind as the leader. So because the mind is the leader, then it's more important than anything else. Just like in society, somebody who's the leader needs to have certain qualities if the thing that they're leading is going to be successful. In just the same way, for every one of us, if all of our actions and speech and even our thoughts are going to be correct, then they need to be done in a way that follows the footsteps of the Buddha. So by taking the Buddha, the awakened one, as their example, in all of our intentional action of body and speech and mind, then we begin with a sense of awakening. Look at our own body and life with a sense of courage, being bold enough to face the truth and not looking away from those things which otherwise we might not want to see. That means aging and pain, sickness and death. These are things that we instinctively want to push away and want to look away from. But the Buddha, he turned completely around and looked directly at these things. And he taught to us that these are the Devadutas. That's the those truths which are noble. And Devaduta, Deva means an excellent being, or in this case it's an excellent truth. And Duta means to communicate that truth. So whenever we see that reality of aging, sickness and death, then we're coming in contact with a very important kind of Deva, and that is Devaduta. It's part of our practice to adapt ourselves and adjust to just those things that we don't like, be they true or otherwise. So this is the truth of suffering. And the Buddha said, suffering is something that we need to focus on knowing. So we must live from moment to moment as the awakened one, awakened to this truth of suffering. The Buddha said, mindfulness is a Dhamma of great support. So, having this human life, let us cultivate sati, or mindfulness, in every moment. If our body is truly going to be of the most value to us, then we need to apply our mindfulness to it so we can learn the lessons that it will teach. In just the same way as when we use anything in nature, we might need to adapt it before it can be really useful to us. Also, our bodies, they need to be adapted. If it's going to be useful to us, we need to use it in the right way. So for our mind, it's a powerful force, but we need to adapt it and adjust it. In just the same way, like the natural resource of water, we might keep that behind a dam, and then we might take that water and want to use it for industry or use it for drinking. Well, first of all, we have to filter it. And so, with mindfulness, focusing on the reality of our life, then we filter all of our understanding until we can see and understand those truths of aging, sickness and death, and see it without bias, and accept that as part of nature. Accept that our body and life is just part of nature. The Buddha encouraged us though, even though this may be something we see as unpleasant or unwished for, the Buddha gave us encouragement. He said that where there is darkness, there's also light. So where there is suffering and when there is this combination of pleasure and pain, that also has its opposite, which is freedom from pleasure and pain. It's the freedom of seclusion, emptiness and peace. It's the coolness of the heart. That's the coolness that wisdom can bring to us when we see clearly. So let's train our hearts to see things as just the way they are. Let's make our view correct and direct. So that's why we study right here with this body, this material thing to which we have so much attachment. It's there that we need to contemplate if we are to attain freedom. Everything that we do in our life, we should do that with a sense of emptiness and freedom. The food that we eat, we understand that it's also empty. Every bit of work that we do, we don't do it for any sense of gain, but we give the benefit of that work, uplift it, and then give it away, do it with a sense of sacrifice. This is the way that we truly develop in Dhamma. We must abandon everything. We abandon the past. After all, it's already gone and we can't hold on to it. We abandon the future. It's also not ours to hold. By abandoning the past and the future, then we give up all kinds of anxiety and worry, and we allow our mind to settle in the present moment. So we call that the mind. that is one-pointed, ekakata. By focusing on watching our own mind, then we can see the mind when it's in a state of purity, and we can see the mind when it's mixed up with other things. We can see unwholesome states of mind when they come into the heart. We can see the mind when it's mixed up with greed, hatred, and delusion. And we focus on that same mind, and we focus on letting go of everything that comes in just the same way that we know the breath. As it comes in and goes out, we allow the breath to come in and go out of our body unobstructed. Let the breath just do its job for itself. In the same way, all those thoughts and states of mind, we allow them to come and we allow them to go. It's just our job to focus on knowing. We know this Dhamma Ramana, mental state or mental object that arises in the mind. It arises according to its own causes that we call Mano Sanya Cetanahara. It has all of that, the cause of all of the past intentional karma of memories and past mental action and also actions of speech and body. Having made all this karma in the past, then the mind now brings up all of these things and we see those things. But now, knowing those and seeing those arising in the mind, it's our job to practice by simply letting go, not delighting and not being disappointed. It's our job not to like or dislike any of these states. We see them as simply obstructions to the pure and undefiled mind. By seeing them and apprehending them, then they don't take over the mind. We don't become them, and we allow them to pass away. This is called maintaining a sense of restraint and composure over our body, over our speech, and having this sense of mindfulness, we also have manners and good conduct, and we have immunity to anything unwholesome which might arise in our mind. How do things arise in the mind? Well, they arise through sense contact. The eye sees forms. That's an object coming into the mind through the mind door, or Chaksu Dwaram. Chaksu Dwara. As objects come into the mind through contact of hearing, we call it Sota Dwara. As we have contact with sense objects, then they can come into the mind. And as the one who knows, the awakened one, we simply know it, and we guard against liking and disliking. We see them as simply objects arising in the mind. They're not us, they're not ours. We don't need to like them or dislike them, but we can simply learn to let them go. And this is the correct way to practice according to all that arises. We don't follow along and chase along after them. We don't allow them to pull us away and drag us away from our mindfulness, but we maintain mindfulness. In that way, we're not tied down, we're not overcome, and we maintain our sense of freedom. We know these things, and we're not overcome by them. This is the peaceful way to practice according to any object that may arise in the mind. We realize that ultimately all of these objects are the same. All objects in the world, whether they're physical or immaterial, they have the same three universal characteristics. We call them samanya. They have the samanya lakkhana, the universal characteristics of anicca. They are impermanent. Dukkha, they're imperfect. And anatta, they don't belong to us or to anyone else. Seeing them like this, then we're able to put them down. And when we put them down, our mind is once again one-pointed. And so the one-pointed mind becomes peaceful, it becomes cool. These objects don't create heat in the mind. The mind is cool. These objects don't create worries in the mind. The mind's still and peaceful. We live as one who's awakened. We live as one who's heedful, whether standing, walking, sitting or lying down. Then we have a sense of coolness and ease, that sense of peace that comes from the heart, which is clean and pure, and from a heart which is empty and comfortable, undisturbed. It's spacious, it's free. This is the ending of all kinds of mental disturbance. It's the ending of all kinds of mental suffering. And this particular kind of ending, the Buddha, he called that Nibbana. That's the cooling down and bringing to peace, bringing to an end. There's two types of Nibbana. There's Khandha Nibbana. That is the Nibbana, or the ending, bringing to peace of the Rupa Khandha. And that's what happens with this body. When this body dies, it inevitably returns to nature, and it comes to its end that way. All the four elements simply return to nature. The other kind of Nibbana is Kilesa Nibbana, and that's the ending of all kinds of attachment and defilements of heart. So the mind that's free of attachment, when the body comes to its end, then the mind also goes to its end, to its coolness, to its emptiness, to its parinibbana. And that is the ultimate kind of ending. That's the ultimate type of cooling. It's the end of the fire of lust, ragaki. It's the end of the fire of hate, dosaki. And it's the end of the fire of delusion, mogaki. When these kinds of fires are extinguished, then the mind, it's cooled down and it becomes peaceful. And when the fires are extinguished and the heart becomes peaceful, then that coolness just comes by itself. The mind's finally liberated from all kinds of harm and danger. Natti santi parang sukhang. There is no greater happiness than peacefulness. This is the natural fruit of our practice. This is a mind which is, having been liberated from its bond, it has power. It has brightness. When we take away any obstruction to a form of light, then it shines freely and it can illuminate everything. We can find that liberation and that illumination right here in our own heart. And it's the natural result of our practice. If we're practicing with this heart, then we make it free from all kinds of suffering, all kinds of danger, and all kinds of harm. So this is what we learn by facing up to this truth of suffering and by truly understanding the meaning of aging, sickness, and death. We learn not to think of this body and life as us or ours, but we leave it alone, and that's called sukhato, one well gone. So we came here to learn. We came here to learn the truth of our lives, and now we see the harm and the danger in the rounds of rebirth. So having developed faith and wisdom to this level, then we take more faith and learn and practice to develop more wisdom. We go forth from that previously deluded state and we develop our heart and uplift it higher and higher. The fruit of that practice brings us happiness and rapture that we call piti and sukha. And it's contentment. We feel that contentment in the heart, and we learn to appreciate the sense of having enough. This is the happiness that we have and take with us wherever we may go. And then, that happiness, we have a sense of ease. So we came here to learn, study, and practice in this way. When we first came, that sense of unfamiliarity made us feel uncomfortable and everything was difficult. But now things are a little easier and our worries are a little bit less. So we continue traveling along this path, and we understand that this path that we travel is not long or short. We simply keep on traveling for the sake of Samma Ditti, the sake of right view, for the sake of bringing our heart to seeing and understanding correctly. We've come here as a community. We've practiced together, and through this practice, we create the greatest benefit for ourselves and others. And we understand this community, we understand this world. Loka we do. We understand the world, and we live in this world. We remain in this world, but we practice correctly, understanding and relating properly to this world. We make use of all of our experience in life and take that as a part of our practice. We practice well, we practice correctly. Supatipanno. This is the training that the Buddha left for all of us. So now that we give importance to this, we develop this practice. We see and recognize the danger in the rounds of rebirth, and we develop our cultivation along the Noble Eightfold Path. So through the merit of this practice and the merit of this triple gem, may that be power and protection for all of you as you go on and continue this noble practice.